And if there's one thing I know about humans, it's that when faced with too many choices, the natural choice becomes to do nothing. And that's why most people stay stuck. It's not from a lack of options, it's from an abundance of them. I want people to think about a goal not from the end result, but instead from the viewpoint of the actions it will take to get there that you're enthusiastic about. And when you're trying to get to your goals through habits and routines that you don't enjoy, it's like slogging through a swamp with mud up to your knees. So whose task is easier? The alcoholic who almost dies, who's been drinking daily for 2 decades and wants to quit, or you, who's just trying to be a little more health conscious this year, a little bit more moderate, a little bit more mindful. Welcome to the Happy, Healthy Human podcast. I'm your host, Paul Levitin. What do the happiest, healthiest humans all have in common? They are students of success. In my mission to help both you and I become the happiest, healthiest humans we can be, I have studied success at all levels. And after spending over a decade working in the field of human development and flourishing, I can tell you with certainty, success leaves clues. On this show, I investigate and explore the common clues and foundational principles that tie together success in all areas of life. Whether it's happiness, health, wealth, relationships, it's all a part of the human experience. By following these success clues and understanding the underlying success principles, you will find that success is not simply a possibility, it's guaranteed. Every Tuesday, I give you simple, straightforward action steps and tools using these clues and principles of success to help you become the happiest, healthiest human you can be. Today's clue is enthusiasm. A few years back, in December of 2021, my coach at the time challenged me with setting an intention for the new year. She asked me to choose a single word that would represent the energy of the year to come. A single word that I would literally hang on my wall and that I could come back to as my guiding light for my intention whenever I got lost in the fog through the ups and downs of the year that were sure to come. Since that year, I have kept this as a part of my annual New Year routine, choosing a word every December to carry me through the coming year. It's interesting looking back and seeing some of the words I've chosen previously. It's almost like a snapshot of where I was emotionally and mentally at the time. For 2023, my word was honesty. I chose that word because I wanted to remember to be honest, not only to others, but to myself. To honor my word and my commitments and to do what I said I was going to do. Before that, in 2022, the word was consistency, which now that I'm thinking about it is quite similar to honesty, actually. I wanted to be consistent with my actions and consistent with my words. It's kind of a theme. This year, 2024, the word that I've chosen for the year is enthusiasm. In September of last year, 2023, I had the opportunity to speak at a men's retreat in front of a group of growth-minded entrepreneurs. The concept of the event was helping participants unleash their future self, and I was scheduled to speak for 30 minutes. So, heading up to the event, as I started to think about potential topics for my talk, my goal, as it is with this podcast and with everything I do, was to give tangible action steps, real-world advice that could help those in the audience immediately. I didn't want to give the cliche advice that I was sure those men had heard hundreds and thousands of times. Because the thing about tactics and advice is that there's no shortage of them out there. Self-help books, personal growth blogs, mental health TikToks. Even on this podcast, I have asked every guest for an action step. And at the end of all of the episodes, I give action steps as well. So nearly 300 episodes, hundreds of guests, hundreds of interviews, hundreds of action steps. And if there's one thing I know about humans, it's that when faced with too many choices, the natural choice becomes to do nothing. And that's why most people stay stuck. It's not from a lack of options, it's from an abundance of them. So when I was planning this talk, I decided that the best value I could give to the men in that room was not to give them more to do, but instead to give them less. That's why I created the easier framework, a decision-making tool to help make sticking to your habits and routines easier instead of making things harder. And you can hear me talk all about that in depth in the episode titled Easier Habits and Routines. I have it linked in the show notes, or just scroll back a few episodes in whatever podcast app you're listening to. And I've also included in the notes here a free Easier Habits checklist that you can download by just clicking the link. And the Easier framework is an acronym I created. And the E stands for enthusiasm. When thinking about committing to a new habit or building a new routine, the first step is to ask yourself, is it something that you are enthusiastic about? Specifically the action, the routine, not the goal. That's the big point here. If your goal is to lose weight, of course you'd be enthusiastic about that. If you could wave a magic wand and just be at your goal weight, you'd be pumped. You'd take that. You'd say, yeah, sure. But the reality is, that's not how it works. You don't get to just skip to the result. Everyone can get enthusiastic about the stuff that they can put on their vision board, the fancy car, having more zeros in your bank account, your dream body, the result. You can get excited about having done the thing. And if that's been you in the past, that can be what's keeping you stuck. Because it's not having done the thing that I'm concerned with. It's doing the thing. It's the action, the verb, not the result that you need to be thinking about. I heard an author say once, everyone wants to have written a book, but no one wants to write. And I mean, I can't sum it up more perfectly than that. Being enthusiastic about a result means literally nothing. Don't choose your actions, habits, your routines based on being enthusiastic about the end result. That is a fast track to nowhere. You need to find a goal that allows you to be enthusiastic about the actions it takes to get that result. And that is the challenge. No one will say no to having the body of their dreams, but that body takes years to build. Years of daily actions, years of exercising when you're tired or busy or sore, years of turning down seconds or desserts, years of prioritizing healthy habits, years of doing hard things with no immediate payoff. And that's what you need to be able to be enthusiastic about. If thinking about the realities of the actions that it takes to create that change makes you rethink it, then you're probably not going to get the result in the long term anyway. So you might as well save yourself some time and not even start. That's just the truth. When I was a personal trainer, the number one thing guys would come to me for was abs, without a doubt. I mean, every guy, it turns out, just wants abs across the board. Seriously. So I'd have this conversation a lot. I'd be starting with a new client and he'd say, I want to look like this. And he'd inevitably show me some picture of some jacked guy on Instagram or the latest celebrity superhero picture from the newest Marvel movie or whatever it was in. What those guys didn't understand was that they were operating under a fundamental fallacy. They'd pose it to me as if the two choices were have abs and don't have abs. If those were the two options, then sure, who wouldn't choose to have abs? But that's a false dichotomy. In reality, you have to zoom out and see the full picture. The choices aren't have abs or don't have abs. The choices are more like do what it takes to get the abs, but still potentially fail for 101 reasons along the way. Maybe you get abs or maybe you don't. Or take the actions to get the abs, but still exercise to feel better, look better, and a million things that could fall in between. And this is leaving out the part about the false equivalencies that a lot of guys have about abs and health or abs and strength, with the long story short being having visible abs is not a good indicator of either health or strength. But the conversation with the guy sitting across from me inquiring about how I, as a personal trainer, could help him get abs, I'd explain, I know that you want abs, but that's the result. Let's look at what it will take to get there. And then you can tell me if you're still interested in going down that path. Because for a guy who's out of shape to get to magazine chiseled abs, here's what you can actually expect to have to do. You're going to have to lift weights 3 or 4 times a week, and that's with or without me. But ideally, you're doing at least a few sessions with me as a trainer, and that's not cheap. Then you're going to have to be in the gym on your own another 2, 3, 4 times a week, doing cardio, mobility. Yeah, it means, yes, stretching, maybe yoga, daily movement outside of the gym, steps, push-ups, more. You definitely have to cut back on alcohol, potentially cut it out completely. You also have to probably cut back on carbs, up your protein, up your sleep, count your macros. You're going to have to reduce eating out to a minimum, again, if at all. You're going to have to cook or prepare the vast majority of your own food. Oh, and I know that in your head, you'd like this to take like 6 weeks probably, but the reality is it's going to be closer to 6 months, probably closer to a year. And that's if you actually get the result at all, because there's an equal chance that you can do all of the stuff that I just said and still not get the physique you're picturing. So now, considering all of that, do you still want to go down this road? And wouldn't you know that once I explained it that way, those guys weren't so enthusiastic about the goal anymore. And the amount of guys actually wanting to commit to the goal of having abs drops substantially, probably 1 or 2 out of every 10. And this wasn't me being mean or harsh, just realistic. Of course, those guys were enthusiastic about the thought of having abs. That's only looking at the positive. What I needed them to understand was that there were a lot of consistent actions they needed to take to get them to that result. And it was a long journey filled with a lot of things that weren't as fun, a lot of things that feel more negative in the moment, even though it was in the pursuit of an all-around positive outcome. But what about those 1 or 2 guys who didn't get scared off by my rant? Those guys heard what I said and they lit up. They'd say, okay, that sounds doable. I love a good challenge. And if that was the response that I got, then that's a guy who I'd be hopeful about committing to this goal with, because they saw the full picture of what was being asked of them and not only agreed to it, but agreed enthusiastically. So going back to the easier framework, I want people to think about a goal not from the end result, but instead from the viewpoint of the actions it will take to get there. Looking at actions, not results, that you're enthusiastic about. And at this point, it's usually when people start to give pushback. You might be thinking, well, no, Paul, I know it's going to be hard. David Goggins told me to stop bitching. And I watched a documentary on the Marines, and their mantra is embrace the suck. Nothing worth doing is easy. Ah. And yeah, I get it. Like rah, rah, motivation, rabble, rabble. I've heard it all. I've read it all. I've watched the videos. I've preached it all. I've been that guy in the past. So to that, my only question is, how's that been working for you? If it were as simple as just man up or just push harder, then what's stopping you? Well, clearly, it's that simple does not mean easy. And when you're trying to get to your goals through habits and routines that you don't enjoy, it's like slogging through a swamp with mud up to your knees. Every step makes a sound. You get stuck in the mud. You have to yank and pull and spend so much energy just to get one foot out, just to take another step and stuck again. And then on and on with each and every step. Could you make it to the other end of the swamp like that? I mean, sure, it's possible. There's one thing I'm sure of, is that the human will and spirit are indomitable. Just about every great thing humans have accomplished has been in the face of insurmountable odds and other people saying, that's impossible. Because everything is impossible until it isn't. But Now you're hearing this, you might think, well, exactly, Paul. I'm a human and I have the ability to do great things. Anything I can do. If I put my mind to it and I don't give up, I can accomplish anything. And I'd wholeheartedly agree with that. I believe in you. My question would just be, why do you want to do it the hard way? Again, going back to that swamp, could you make it to the end, pulling your foot with all your might, each and every step, swatting bugs out of your face, huge backpack weighing you down, stomping through the mud? Slowly, slowly, slowly. I mean, yeah, I suppose you could. But what if you looked just to the side and saw a road along the side of the swamp, and it's paved and dry, and there's a bicycle sitting there that says free to ride? Because the shortest distance between any 2 points is a straight line. So we often see a straight shot through the swamp and think that it's ideal, and think that a road that goes all the way on the outskirts is taking the long way. But again, this is a false dichotomy, one where the options of either take the straight route through the swamp or take the paved route around the outskirts are the same in all ways except the distance. But that's just not the case. You have to look at the whole picture, and ease of effort comes into play here. Because as forceful as your will may be, there are limits to what we will sacrifice. Yeah, a lot of people have done great things through sheer willpower, but many more have not. And again, simply looking at the story as so-and-so did it, so I can too, is missing a lot of the context. A lot of the great stories we know of, people who won because sheer willpower, they didn't choose to do that. They did it because they had to. And that's a key differentiator. The founder who hit it big with $1 billion app after grinding out 20-hour days for however many years, well, they also spent all of their life savings invested in that app, and they were living out of their car. They had no other choice. Some people quit drugs or drinking cold turkey, but many of them have to because they have hit rock bottom and come so close to death that they have no option except to change. So whose task is easier? The alcoholic who almost dies, who's been drinking daily for 2 decades and wants to quit, or you, who's just trying to be a little more health conscious this year, a little bit more moderate, a little bit more mindful? You can't say. They're different situations. But the alcoholic on the verge of losing his family, losing his job, losing his life, well, probably is going to be able to dig a little bit deeper. That's not saying anything about you. That's just the nature of life. When an animal is cornered, it will chew through its own leg to survive. Even the most docile animals will attack when their survival is threatened. They can call on strength that literally wouldn't otherwise be possible. And that same animal could not be trained to attack in the same way. It's in them somewhere, but it can only be accessed under very specific circumstances. The old cliche goes, change happens when the pain of staying the same is worse than the pain of change. And that's a problem for the average person who just wants to be a little better. For you, for me. Because the fact of the matter is, I do have a choice, and you probably do too. Yes, it would be nice to lose some weight, to work out more, to save more money for retirement, to read more. There's lots of good things that would be cool to do. But will you die if you don't? Probably doubtful. So when you're trying to change your life, your habits, your routines by slogging through the mud, when you're trying to commit to some outlandish routine that you hate, but you feel like you quote unquote should be able to do, you're setting yourself up for failure because you are not backed into a corner. If you were, you probably could. And some people hear this and use it as a strategy. You might have heard the concept of burning the boats. And that's when you purposefully limit all your options so that, like that cornered rat, you have no choice but to take the action that you're forced to take. And while I agree that, again, that is a valid option, to me, it just doesn't seem very fun, especially since, as I told all of those aspiring Instagram models in the gym, nothing can guarantee the results. You can burn through the boats, slog through the swamp, you can diet, exercise, whatever else, and there's still a real chance that you don't get the result you're after. That's just life. So since you can't guarantee that the hard way will get results, and since your back isn't against the wall, forcing you to just do it no matter what, and the big boulders you're trying to move, like happiness, health, wealth, relationships, these are all things that you will be working on forever, not just until you reach your goal. And you want to, be able to enjoy life. That leads me to the only logical conclusion that starting with enthusiasm first as a life principle is a no-brainer. So I gave this talk breaking down the reasonings behind the E for enthusiasm, as well as the rest of the easier framework. But since that day, that word enthusiasm has just stuck with me. Enthusiasm. And really, even though I think the rest of the framework is still valid and has a lot of merit, if I wanted to simplify things more, I would just say enthusiasm is the end-all be-all. It is a framework in and of itself. It's a lens that you can make all of your decisions through. Am I enthusiastic about this? If yes, it's probably good. And if not, it's probably worth rethinking. It really is that simple. Do you get excited at the thought of meeting up with your friends for dinner? Then go. Are you dragging your feet and just going for some weird reasons even though you don't really want to see those people? Well, then don't. It's not rocket science, but so much of what we do is dictated by others, dictated by society, dictated by the way things should be or what you're supposed to do. When it could be so much easier if you just made decisions based on things you're enthusiastic about. I was working as a recruiter for one of the largest headhunting firms in Texas in a lucrative job that made me lots of money. But I looked at the realities of what that life entailed. The long hours, not being able to focus on my own health, commuting to an office, a culture of drinking and living for the weekend. And I didn't like that. It didn't get me excited, and I certainly wasn't enthusiastic about building my life that way. So I quit. I used to lift weights as my main form of exercise. And then a few years back, I tried indoor rock climbing, and I immediately fell in love. It's not as intense as lifting. You don't get jacked, but I enjoy it more. I could spend hours climbing when lifting for 45 minutes felt like a chore. So I started lifting less and climbing more. Is it ideal? It doesn't matter. It's not rocket science, but how much of what you do in your day-to-day is done for any reason besides what you are enthusiastic about. And now, obviously, sometimes you have to do things that you don't want to do. You have to work. You have to exercise. You have to eat healthy. But you can still find enthusiasm about the way you do these things. There are infinite career paths, infinite ways to exercise, infinite ways to eat healthy and fuel your body. Don't think eating healthy sucks. Instead, ask, what's a way that I can eat healthy that I can be enthusiastic about? It all comes back to your intention. Instead of focusing on the result, which we know actually doesn't get us the result anyway, what if there was another option? What if you could shift your attention and your intention to making the most out of the journey? Not because it gets you to the result faster. In all honesty, it might get you there slower. But instead, you do it because life, as it turns out, is more journey than it is result. You spend much more time climbing the mountain than you ever do at the peak. So that's why my word for 2024 is enthusiasm. That will be the guiding light, the framework I use to decide what I will and won't do. And my action step for you this week is to try this lens on for yourself. What would your enthusiastic life look like? As a bonus action step and a challenge to you, if you haven't already, come up with a word for your 2024 intention. And if you do, email it to me at paul@paullevitin.com or DM me on Instagram at paullevitin, and I'll choose a few of those who do, and share with them on a coming episode. I hope that this helps and allows you to come into 2024 enthusiastically. That's it for today. Remember, success leaves clues. So I hope this clue of enthusiasm helps you on your journey to becoming a more happy, healthy human. As always, support the show by sharing this episode with a friend or leaving a rating and review in whatever app you're listening to this podcast on.